Oh, good morning. We're somewhat warm here. It's 25 degrees, approximately 77 Fahrenheit. Only yesterday and today is the weather going to be like this. It's going to be back to being underwhelming tomorrow and the rest of the week. I'd rather hoped that it would be quite warm on Thursday for the dog show, because of what I plan to wear. Basically, it needs to be a bit warmer than it's going to be. It's only going to be in the high 60s, which of course is good for the dogs. Although I have a sun reflective cage cover, which keeps my dogs really cool. It's excellent. It wasn't cheap, it was about £100, but it really does the job. Well, I have to say that I still feel a bit knocked for six by what happened on Facebook on Saturday. I'm still somewhat shocked that those sort of pictures could be uploaded, and I've read yesterday that Facebook in May supposedly introduced new software to catch this sort of thing, but clearly it didn't work. Yes, I am pleased that it was all removed, and every reference in all of people's comments was removed too. I guess I was surprised by that. Not so much surprised that the page itself was taken down. But anyhow, I know that there are other people who've had a very similar past to myself who read my blog, or now listen to me rattle on. And I have to tell you that this sort of happening and the rather subdued effect it's had on myself, is normal. This doesn't mean that you haven't gotten over it. It doesn't mean that you haven't done the work, and it doesn't mean that you've gone backwards. We're human beings, and there are things that are going to remind us of the past, and it's not going to be easy just to shrug that off. The big difference being that whilst it's made me feel sad, melancholy, my initial reaction to it all was fear, which is natural, but there's nothing to be afraid of today, and my mind has figured that out, and so the fear's gone, and I'm left with this sort of empty feeling, this sad feeling again. Anyway, the major difference though is that I have not resorted to self-harm or to any other form of behaviour that in the past such feelings would have triggered. And that is what recovery is all about. It's about living with the feelings and just letting yourself feel them and not trying to get rid of it. It has to run its course. You know, and I know for myself anyway, I used to get very frustrated when I had days like this. Because I took it as a sign of weakness and a sign that I hadn't really recovered, and that, you know, the years of hard work I've put in and the years of therapy were all a complete waste of time, because something like this can knock me for six. That isn't true, because as I pointed out, I would have been doing all sorts of things in the past to get rid of this, and all of the things I did were harmful to myself. And like I say, I no longer act out. I just instead feel it and let it happen. There isn't anything particular else that I can say. Just that anybody else who was affected by what they saw, it will pass. The one thing I don't have is a great deal of anger or rage, which I know that several of you out there will be feeling, and perhaps even those who aren't directly affected, i.e. we're not victims, will be feeling this anger. But I can tell you now that the anger does you no good whatsoever. Anger is an appropriate feeling, and it's one that we need to survive. But in this situation, it isn't really appropriate, and it's unnecessary, although normal, to react. But you see, it rather depends on whether the anger that we feel prevents us from doing the right thing, or seeing the utter wretchedness and sadness of all of the people involved. Not just those poor children, but the perpetrators too. We really do need to understand this. If all we have for perpetrators is anger and disgust and rage, we perpetuate the problem. We enable it to continue. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. Such people are not born that way. They're made that way. And that is not an excuse, because unacceptable behaviour is still unacceptable regardless. There is no way at all that child abuse can be justified. No way at all. However, to only harbour hatred for the perpetrators denies that they are a damaged child also, and does nothing to help end this terrible tragedy. Anger and rage towards perpetrators does nothing for their victims, and felt by the victim does nothing but damage them also. And I'm not saying that you should beat yourself up for feeling anger, but you must be prepared to let go of it and see it for what it is. A natural, instinctive response that doesn't really need to be fed. Anger and fear are our biggest enemies, but at the same time we need both in order to survive, and getting the balance right is really difficult, as evidenced by the world that we live in. Fear and anger hold sway in our world. And instead of feeling so righteous and justified in our anger, we really need to be prepared to get it go, to let it go. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm doing okay, and this too shall pass. Bye.